44% of Republican voters and independents who lean Republican would prefer leaders to compromise, and only 23% favored the alternative, leaders sticking to their beliefs. Meanwhile, 62% of Democrats and independents who lean Democratic favored compromise, and only 12% favored sticking to their beliefs. The general idea that we have to hold out for our beliefs at all costs goes against the will of the people, Frank Newport, the editor-in-chief at Gallup, told Newspulse News. I think one of the greatest problems facing America today is the public's disdain and lack of confidence in their elected representatives. I think these data show what the public would like them to do, which would allow them to recover a little of that respect. Whether they do it or not remains to be seen. Over the past few years, the general pattern has shown that Democrats are more likely than Republicans to prefer compromise, a pattern that predates President Trump's administration and the recent Republican congressional majorities. Prior to Trump, we certainly still saw this extremely low respect for the legitimacy of Congress, Newport said. Amy Gutmann, president and a political science professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and Dennis Thompson, a political philosophy professor at Harvard University, argue that the intrusion of campaigning into actual governance, known as the permanent campaign, fosters attitudes that make compromise far more difficult. They published an essay, Perspectives on Politics, about how this uncompromising mindset is conducive to campaigning but not to governing. Republicans, including Trump, have struggled to push through major legislative items through Congress despite controlling a majority in both chambers. Notably, GOP leaders attempted to force through an overhaul of the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, through a party-line vote without making concessions to the Democrats. He also sided with Chuck and Nancy, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, DNY, and House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, D. California, on a deal to keep the government open for 3 months. Sarah A. Binder, a senior fellow of governance studies at the Brookings Institution, a nonpartisan think tank in Washington, D.C., wrote back in 2000 that gridlock is in many ways endemic to our national politics and the natural consequence of our separation of powers. Nudging Congress back to the center by sending more centrist legislators to Washington would be one way to alleviate gridlock, Binder said. Still, diagnosing the ills of a body politic is one thing, rousing the patient to seek treatment is another. But the one group that is more in favor of sticking to principle are those who are very conservative. That's a small percentage of the population, but those are very active voters in Republican primaries, Newport said. You've got a situation now where any Republican office holder is going to be confronted in a primary by these very conservative voters. That's one of the reasons we have the situation we do.